Now it's worth saying at this point that effects can be applied to tracks and clips in the same way that we were talking about clips and tracks when we were talking about the audio lines. You can apply different effects to individual clips or to whole tracks, but they're done in a slightly different way. If you want to apply an effect to a clip, you actually get it from the effects bin, and then you go to the category audio effects, which are here, and then you see that you've got a whole bunch of audio effects that you can apply. And I think pretty much all the ones that make any sense are exactly the same in either side, between whether you do it on a track or you do it on an individual clip basis. And there are some very useful effects that you can actually play with. So for instance, you've got de-hummers, de-essers, de-cracklers, de-clickers, bits and pieces that you can apply to an individual track. So for instance, we've got EQ. So if I was to take EQ and drop it on this particular item here, click on there, go to my effects controls to edit it, and open up EQ, you'll see that we've got all the individual parameters. We've got custom setup, so we can actually physically get in there and make changes. I'll show you how to make changes to this in a little while. So you see that there is actually a floating box that you can play with, which is brilliant, and you've got individual parameters that you can get to, so you can actually, all the buttons that are in there are available as individual buttons that you can play with. So you've got all of that. As you can see, it does disappear a bit when you start scrolling up and down. It's not always completely reliable that it's going to appear, but individual parameters are actually just these buttons. So if you can play with the buttons here, the alternative is you can actually open them up and slide them a little bit easier down here to change settings. So you can see that one's actually changing the main output there. So you can actually get in there and make individual changes here, or you can just play with the individual sliders. So that's how you apply items to a clip. You go to the effects panel, you go to audio effects, you find the effect you want and apply it to the clip, and then you open it up in the effects controls panel and you play around with the bits and pieces that you have. Okay, so that's how you do it on a clip basis, but sometimes you want to apply these different effects to whole tracks. I'm going to go back to the audio mixer here and show you that seems to be fairly well hidden, but right at the very top of this audio mixer panel you have got a little twirly, a little drop down triangle, and when you click that it opens up a whole panel that you've probably not seen before, and we've got 5 slots for individual effects. And also we have things called sends, which we'll get to a bit later. These are for submixes. So we can also click in here and you've got a little drop down, and that gives you the same list as you have down here. Okay, so you can choose any one of these ones. So here's the EQ again, so let's click EQ. Now this EQ is going to affect the whole of this track. It's not going to affect the individual clips. I can have my own EQ on an individual clip, but actually it's going to affect the whole channel. And in actual fact, I'm going to put this on channel 3. So I'm going to go to channel 3 and I'm going to put the EQ on that particular one here. And hopefully you're going to be able to hear what I do. As I say, I don't actually have audio feedback as I'm recording these tutorials, but hopefully I can show you how this works. Now, it's a little bit confusing how these work. You find the effects from the drop down and you get the effect that you want. So we want EQ. And then we appear to have a little button here that just shows me one thing and a drop down. And that allows me to get each of the individual buttons in exactly the same way as we had that drop down when we looked in effects controls. So we can get to the individual buttons one by one, which is a nightmare of a way of working. So I wouldn't use that in actual fact. We also have a little F button here which turns on and off the effect. So that's now off with the red line through it and on. But if you right click, or on a Mac it's control click, but honestly if you're control clicking on the Mac and you've only got a 1-button mouse, go and buy a 3-button mouse and stop wasting your time. But anyway, right click on there and you get a whole bunch of options. For starters, you've got presets that have already been made. We can choose whether this effect happens before the fader, so that the fader will affect the whole track including the effect, or whether the effect is after the fader. So after the fader is done, however much animation you've got on the fader, you can apply the clip after that, so you can choose pre or post fader. You can decide if it's going to be safe during writing, so if you do actually make changes on the fader during a write cycle with the animation modes, the automation modes we'll show you later, it's not going to hurt the actual effect. You've got the defaults, but you've also got the edit button, and that's what we want. The edit button gives me a floating window. And there's the floating window. Here are all the individual buttons which you can only get to one at a time down here. And we can actually get in there and we can start to make changes to the individual bits and pieces as we're playing through. Now, this particular effect is one that I actually use quite a lot, because it's a way, it's actually very much like the parametric EQ. There is actually an effect, I'll just quickly show you, there is an effect in here called parametric EQ. If I go to parametric EQ and I right click on that one, and you'll notice we haven't got an edit button for it. And the parametric EQ is one of those ones where it would be great if we could use it in the big sense that we have it in Audition or Sound Booth, but we don't have the same options here that we have in Audition and Sound Booth. And the way the EQ is done here is it gives you individual points which affect a whole range of frequencies, and you can turn those points on and off with these little buttons. And when you click the buttons, you can raise things up or you can pull them down to give a better effect. So if I drag this one up, I'm going to increase the high frequency or take out high frequency. In fact, there's even a thing here called cut. So if you've got hiss, you can cut it. Alternatively, you can just drag it down yourself to cut it by the amount that sounds good or right for you. So you do have those options to be able to play with those bits and pieces. And you can cut the low frequency as well. But I use this to sweeten up audio a great deal. Now I've got a lovely piece of music here, so I'm just going to play with it briefly to show you how it works without actually being able to listen to it myself. So I'll push play and I'll play around with these just so you get a feel for what's going on. So I hope you get the idea of that. You can change the way a sound goes on the fly. Obviously you'd be listening to it when you do it, and I'm not listening to it. For audio, for spoken word, this is actually quite a good curve, I often find. Boost the low frequency, boost the high frequencies, pretty much don't touch the middle. If you touch the middle you can end up sounding like you're in a phone box or something. And these ideas down here, the Q is the width of the effect. Is it very notchy, i.e. it's very, very tight and just affecting a tiny bit, or is it affecting the whole thing? And you can pull out the Q very wide or very narrow. So that's one effect. Obviously there are a whole bunch of effects, and what you need to do is actually get in here and find them and try them, have fun with them. So for instance, you've got a phaser. Remember, right click on it, you've got options, you can click on edit, and then you go in there and you can play with all kinds of bits and pieces. Here's the phaser. So you get the idea. You can actually play with these on a track basis. So this is affecting everything in the whole track. If I wanted the phaser on an individual clip, say this clip here, I can go and find the phaser down here in my audio effects. So let's go down and find the phaser. There's the phaser. I can take the phaser, drop it on the actual clip I want it to go on, open up my effects control panel. There's my phaser. Open up the custom setup box. There it is. I can affect just that clip. Okay, so that's how you can apply effects to clips, and you can apply effects to tracks, and there is a big difference between the two. In the next tutorial I just want to talk about a couple of very useful effects like the one I've just shown you that help you to be able to process sound and deal with problems quite quickly.